This is the key. We are not just going to analyze this.
Can't I get a point cake?
I don't like it. Can't we just pipe in a bit of applause?
Am I being thicket? How do you not know?
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
Evil genius with secret alien software.
Do you have a time window?
It's top of our list.
Do you have a time window?
We need you here right now.
The truth is,
I bring disaster.
God knows we stopped enough of them.
There's a storm coming in. He waits no more.
Whoa! Hello! It's Pull to Open. Yes, this is the stop on your podcast dial normally for randomly selected adventures throughout the Doctor Who canon. But you know what? We have parked the randomizer for a while. We're talking about current Doctor Who. We're talking about the thing that just dropped on our Disney Plus doorstep. Yes, that we're talking about The Legend of Ruby Sunday. We're going to talk about Mrs. Flood. We're going to talk about dust clouds. We're going to talk about Mel. We're going to talk about time windows. And above all, we're going to talk about the big reveal at the end, which, spoiler alert, if you don't know it, if you have not seen The Legend of Ruby Sunday, stop this podcast now.
Go back now.
We are going to talk about Sutekh, the return of the Destroyer. Oh my God. Big time. Oh, by the way, I'm Pete Pachal.
And I'm Chris Journalism. Or maybe... Maybe I think we should just all call ourselves that way now. But maybe actually I'm Chris Arbinger, because I've again this was a screener situation. I saw this days ago. We're mixing our hot takes and our cold takes to bring you tepid takes. Who doesn't like tepid takes? But actually, the hot take sort of floats on top of the cold take, I think. Anyway,
does that make you the ice in my hot take?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I've been seeing it multiple times. I've been doing way too much thinking about it. Pete has just seen it. Pete, so I'm going to throw it over to you. Insta reaction. Did you expect Sutekh, or is it a case of nobody expects the Spanish Sutekh?
Definitely a case of nobody expects. What I thought, though, like, you're putting things together. You're thinking, like, okay, the one who waits, which we've heard about, first from the Celestial Toymaker, who's already super powerful. And, okay, you think this thing has to be really powerful. And then you get all these hints throughout this episode of what it's leading to. And there's all the biblical stuff with the church. And then the woman in Unit HQ, Harriet Harbinger, great name.
Yes.
Don't know why that wasn't a red flag, Kate. But anyway,
Kate would have put that, or the Doctor would have mentioned it, or like it would be somewhere in the unit files from 1963. Maybe there was a dating controversy.
And so she starts uttering all these
1970s confirmed. I don't want to get too far in the podcast without just throwing that in there. Unit 1970s confirmed.
Well, we did know it was in the 1970s from the invasion, which was supposedly 1979. So,
but yes, they're getting more explicit about it. Anyway, sorry, please go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that she starts uttering all these monster names and the Pantheon stuff, like the Maestro and others. And my head instantly was going to the Beast from the Satan Pit.
Ooh.
That's where I was thinking, because also that's roughly almost 20 years, like it's RTD 1.0, it's people who are Millie Gibson's age who might remember it, you know what I mean? Like, or even slightly younger. Like it's a classic villain from New Who.
Let me interrupt you Whomoji style to say the impossible planet Satan Pit. Because yes, you were not wrong when you went there, right? Because another name for Sutekh is Satan. And it's never been said on or off the screen, like if that Satan of the Satan Pit was also maybe connected to Sutekh. It's possible that RTD is trying to tie the two together here. So you may look more prescient than the rest of us, sir.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you didn't guess it specifically as Sutekh, but you were thinking Satan.
I was thinking something on that level. Like, yes, definitely like a Satan level creature. And I thought, well, like we've seen Satan basically in that episode. But no, I didn't think Sutekh. And you sort of in hindsight, there's a lot of signs like the dust cloud in particular and the way it kills the colonel or the general or the major. I forget his name. That guy who sort of like is just sort of decayed away.
Yeah.
So all those are like some subtle hints.
Yeah, the fact that he turned to sand when I saw that again. And yes, lest we forget, there has already been an explicit Pyramids of Mars reference in this season in the Devil's Chord. By the way, another name for a chord, a triad. Just going to throw that in there. You've been looking at triangles all along, people. I've been staring at triangles that have existed throughout the show, throughout the season. They've been in the background everywhere. We've been looking at pyramids everywhere, as if that wasn't a giveaway. We had the Sarah Jane scene reshot with actual money. And now what we've learned is RTD wants to reshoot Pyramids of Mars with actual money. Like, he wants to see Sutekh. And I think from, the CGI dog at the end with the original Sutekh voice, the guy doing it is 92.
Yeah.
But
that's
Sutekh.
oh God, what's his
Sutekh
name now? Is Jeff Coulter? Does that sound right? No,
it's I got it here somewhere. But anyway, that guy, a million fans are screaming at us right now as they listen to this podcast what his actual name is. But he's a legend. He is Sutekh. He's always been Sutekh. And that voice,
Gabriel Wolf. Why did I say random names? I knew it was a G.
This is Gabriel a random podcast. We bring you random names. We also, by the way, bring you random backgrounds. I just want to acknowledge for people on YouTube or Spotify video that, yes, I am coming to you live from the Maestro's piano. So hence the shimmer effect. But
so anyway. I want to bring it back to Sutekh. I want to sort of open and close the podcast on that huge reveal. But let's go over some sort of key elements of the story here. Yes. And sort of aspects, whether you liked it or not, and which worked and which didn't. So there's the return of unit, which this seems to be this is the RTD 2.0 unit. It's the Avengers Tower style. You have Kate, you have now Rose is working there. I would say strangely Donna isn't, except that Catherine Tate, I'm sure, is busy. Though exactly. It's a fair question. What is she doing? And also, I'm sure everyone's thinking, where's 14?
They did not head off that question as one might, as the, RTD has done in the past to tell us why Torchwood won't be involved in such and such an episode, right?
Right.
He throws that line in that he knows. So, yeah, I think we're being teed up for 14 in the finale.
So you have, this is the first time we've seen Lenny Rush as Morris Gibbons.
Yeah, it's a bit...
How did you think that worked?
So I like Lenny Rush. I'll just say that first. I really liked him there's an excellent British comedy show, really dark comedy called Am I Being Unreasonable? And he has a star turn in that, and you'll just love him forever after that. He's amazing. Here, he just, I don't know. Maybe it's the little scooter that they got for him. Or him plus the blinks. It all just felt a little bit too, baby's first unit Avengers playset.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's
little
too cartoony. I don't want to say anything bad about the actor. I think he was fine. He did what he needed to do. I believed him. Would have rather had seen. I think honestly, in a longer season, you probably would have seen him already, and there would have been some mini unit adventure. So, say it was a 12-episode season, and I kind of wanted more. I wanted to believe that character more because he mentions he's 13, but there's nothing, Doogie Howser-esque about what he's doing and why that's either interesting or add sort of a dimension to the character. It was all just kind of like caricature to me.
Yeah, that's the bit that feels like it's like just a play set. Like we're just selling toys now, right? Star Wars can sometimes feel like that it's a bit too toyetic.
Maybe he's got some plans, RTD, in the future to add a little more depth there. But I also felt like it's just a bit of a stretch that he would have any kind of authority, as a 13-year-old. It doesn't really matter how smart you are. Like, you need a certain amount of life experience to kind of have a certain, make these key decisions in a crisis situation like this. Right.
Yeah.
So
I'll say my thinking evolved on that from first viewing to second viewing. I'll say anyone who felt like me that was a little too sort of play set-y, and the Blinks and Morris together. the second time around, I kind of saw what RTD was doing more. Like, he takes the very light, cartoony, children-y side of Unit, and then suddenly we're in the dark, right? Then we're in the time window, and then things get very kind of Empire Strikes Back in there, you know? So we've gone from one extreme of Doctor Who to the other.
Yeah, so let's go to talk about the time window a little bit. Oh, by the way, where was the again, I'm forgetting everyone's names, but the previous scientific advisor, you know, she was in the wheelchair.
Yes, can't remember her name either. She is coming back. She was just unavailable for filming this. So I think they're just going to have rotating scientific advisors now.
Makes sense. We got bring in someone from, you know, the Australian division or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the daycare.
Yeah, they can be the recurring guest star can be the unit scientific advisor. Like, you know, whoever the guest star of the week, bring them in. I love it. I do think we're being teed up for a unit spin-off, by the way. This is so like going to be a Disney show.
All right, let's talk about the time window for a bit. So I thought that was really well handled because they're trying to sort of introduce or reintroduce the idea of time travel and going back on your own timeline to the new viewers that are just tuning in for the first time, presumably on Disney Plus. And so it's like, because that's always comes up. It's like, well, why did, you know, if the thing you needed to do was last Monday, why don't you just keep going back to last Monday until you get the thing that you need to do? And there's always some decent, not really a good explanation, but it's good enough for Doctor Who of like, okay, you can't cross over your own timeline or for the shorthand of the Blinovich limitation effect or what have you.
Yes,
And,
in my mind, there was someone just off screen shouting, except for Father's Day, and someone else saying, shh. But no, I really loved it. What I really loved about the time window is like you walk in, impressive sci-fi set, and the Doctor said, oof, rough. Like, just to him, this is, and you like, oh yeah, it's tin cans and string to you, isn't it? Like, it's rare that you get that sense. I'll just say it's kind of rude, but we know the Doctor's never been known for his tact, and this is how he'd react. He's a bit of a time travel snob. We've talked about that with the goblins.
True.
And that's sort of coming through here as well. But also, he understands that Unit went off books and developed time travel without his say-so. Was that a reference to anything in the classic series, by the way? Because I didn't find any references to Time Window before Girl in the Fireplace or Day of the Doctor. They seem to be the two big Time Window episodes.
No, I can't remember anything where Unit was doing anything like this, or even said, or even the words time window.
Well, just like maybe Pertwee said something offhand about Brigadier, you must never invent time travel or something. That sort of makes this episode makes you feel like there's something in the archives there.
No, I don't think so. But it did actually increase sort of the Avengers feel to me, and it really felt a lot like a first Avengers movie where. Yeah. The whole thing is that the organization has its own semi-nefarious plans to manipulate the thing the bad guys want to manipulate in the first place, right? So there's all these sort of, in other words, it's like Unit is very rapidly becoming S.H.I.E.L.D. And I guess maybe that's just a symptom of these kinds of stories where you have the real world Earth reaction to the sci-fi things that sort of turns bad. And in this case, it's not really turning bad, but it is sort of exposing some undertones and stuff. But again, again, it's well-trod territory. I don't know if it's that interesting. It's obviously just a backdoor for them to get this sort of time travel, time window set piece.
Well, there's definitely Marvel vibes. I think we should talk about that. There was definitely an MCU feel about the Sutek CGI, the dog creature, which, by the way, what are we supposed to think was under the mask in Pyramids of Mars? Was it Susan Twist, but with that shock of hair at the end? Or was it...
They show it, right?
Was it the dog? Was they...
Well, they have the mask, and then they have what's under the mask with the very slim, almost like horse head face.
Oh, he does take it off in Pyramids of Mars.
Right, yeah. A couple times.
Okay.
Towards the end. So the mask has the glowing eyes, and then underneath
I just want to interject and say, listeners, if you want to know about Pyramids of Mars, we did a podcast on it, but be prepared. it's a bit rough.
Hey.
We were kind of lashing things together with tin cans and string. Just going to say that, but go
It
listen
was
to it.
early
it's
pull
charming.
to open. I think it was season 2, I want to think, or
But
first full year of randomness.
I will say, I'll put most of the "it's a bit rough" on me because I just did not even understand that Sutek was on Earth. Like that's how clueless I was about that story. Like we had that whole debate of is he on Earth or is he on Mars? Like I'm lost with all the back and forth. Yeah. Where's the beacon?
Yeah.
Why is the beacon there? It can get through the sun anyway. Sorry,
That was a little rough, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
but yeah, Sutek. Well, we're going to come back to Sutek in a bit. So the time window stuff I thought was pretty neat, and then certainly they're all trying to look at her mom, and the thing is, here's where I think it doesn't quite go wrong, but it is like, okay, we're trying to figure out this mystery of both Ruby Sunday and who Susan Triad is. And there's all this, like, who's her mom? Maybe it's one or the other. I don't know. It felt a little like maybe we didn't have the crisis yet. And maybe as viewers, I guess it works because we as viewers know there's going to be a crisis because this is a Doctor Who episode and the stakes are going to be pushed super high. I guess that hasn't actually happened to the characters yet. But in other words, like on my level, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I care about Ruby and I want her to find her mom, but it's like there's some serious thing that's about to happen, guys. Like, let's eye on the ball here. Like,
yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah, I definitely felt that when they're in the time window and they're all focused on Ruby's mom and having that moment, and the Doctor hugs her, and you're absolutely right. It's like, let's talk about the TARDIS in the room here. Which is, I gotta say, justice for TARDISes. The Doctor has clearly treated the TARDIS abominably. The TARDIS has indigestion, from how it sounds in half of this episode. Right. Give it some TARDIS tums, just something.
He even comes in, he does the skid at the beginning, which again, it's all like Disney money, special effect stuff, but it's also like, why would you even do that? Like,
the TARDIS has been a bit wrong. The TARDIS has been a bit wrong since Wild Blue Yonder, and I feel that we are all bad TARDIS owners for not noticing. We need to have our TARDIS licenses suspended. We haven't really noticed. The TARDIS have been getting sick on our watch, Pete. On our watch. The TARDIS, and I'm saying this, regular Pull to Open listeners know, I'm a big use the TARDIS in the story proponent, and my God, if the TARDIS has been carrying Sutek all along, which is what it sounds like happened from what Harry Harbinger said.
Yeah, they haven't connected all the dots yet, right? So if the TARDIS has been is a key to this somehow, because it's where everything sort of comes together in the time window, like you say, it's got the indigestion stuff. And then Sutek materializes around it when it's back at Unit HQ there. So there's that. Now, put that aside for a second. Now there's Mrs. Flood, right?
Yes.
And that was a rather short and early on. But we finally have confirmation, which we all kind of suspected and kind of knew that there's more here than meets the eye, because she says that.
Sure. More here
line about
her eyes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, she has the line about, the one who waits is coming. I forget the exact line, but
yes,
the storm's
coming. The storm is coming. He is almost here, and then he has arrived. Or he waits no more.
Yeah.
That's her line. He waits no more. So who do you think Mrs. Flood is?
Well, if you think about it, maybe I wonder if you could sort of bend over backwards and say, like, maybe she means the cable guy, and maybe she literally means the storm's coming. Just conventional stuff.
She does have this very important line. It seems that Anita Dobson really plays up this line in a very sort of, I'm an actor and I'm pointing to this line sort of way. I always seem to hide myself away. So I think maybe that's a clue. Maybe she's Susan and it's a double red herring. That might be a thing we pull out in Empire of Death.
Well, I think she has to be. Like, that's the only thing I can think of other than Ruby's mom, who is someone we haven't seen yet, and that's Susan. Or it could be both, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't talk about Susan, you don't tease Susan, you don't have them wonder about Susan and not deliver on Susan. I just feel like that would be cruel, again, especially looking at the big picture of Doctor Who, that Carol Ann Ford is still with us and presumably available. Like you should use that.
If they can get 92-year-old Mr. Wolf to reprise his part as Sutek, they can damn well get Carol Ann Ford. So I want at least a look back at a regeneration of how she became Mrs. Flood, if that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
justice for Carol Ann. Yeah.
Doesn't it seem a little like rush to judgment, though, that they just sort of all suddenly assume Susan Triad is Susan, his granddaughter, just because she has sort of the same name? And it's like, there's that. I did really like the thing where it's like, wait, the anagram's TARDIS. And they're all like, yeah, we know. We're not that dumb.
Duh. Yeah. Held at bay with a false anagram we were. Yeah, I thought that was very clever. And because as the fans get more sophisticated, as time goes on, the showrunners are going to be cleverer and cleverer to keep twists at the end from us. And RTD, first of all, by having two separate strands turning out to be the same thing, who is Susan Twist, who is the one who waits. Brilliant, because that gets our brain going in both directions. So we're kind of distracted from the essential question of, wait, what if they're one and the same? Right. So we still have the Ruby's mom mystery, and I'm gonna plant a flag here. It's very tentative, but I'm thinking Rose.
Oh,
and let me tell you why. They clearly flagged that line about how old Ruby's mom would be now, and it basically would not be someone of the age of Susan Triad, so it can't be Mrs. Flood. It's more typical that a teenager or in your early 20s, you abandon your child. That matches Rose at some point, perhaps. And if this is Rose and it's 2004, it's pre-Doctor Who. But she would be...
She'd be 18.
18. Yeah.
Ooh.
And it would be exactly a year before she meets Tennant briefly in an alleyway and thinks he's just a drunk.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That all kind of tracks. That's a big bet. But I
remember that
kind of like your chances.
Rose and the TARDIS are connected. Whatever is happening with the TARDIS, there was something in the dialogue. Go back and listen to it with Harriet Arbinger. She talks about the god whispering to the vessel. The vessel is clearly the TARDIS. The god has been whispering to the vessel for quite some time, and the Lord of Time was vain and did not notice. So basically, Sutek has been lurking inside the TARDIS in some way. Who else is connected to the TARDIS? Bad Wolf. Anyway.
Right. I want to bring it back to Sutek in a minute, but I want to just go over a couple other quick things. So we talked about Susan. So there's a neat little scene with the Doctor and Kate where he's talking about he has a granddaughter and you never mentioned it. You never even mentioned it to my dad. Yep. And he's like, well, that was a different doctor. And she's like, well, that means you have kids, right? And this was kind of infuriated me because he was kind of like, well, it doesn't quite work that way with Time Lords. And I was like, oh, come on. I was really like, come on. You yourself have been in charge of stories, Russell, where he said he's a father, the Doctor's daughter, notably. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are we talking about here?
I think we're talking rule number 1, my friend. Rule number 1. The Doctor lies. I don't think that RTD would just casually drop a cannon bomb like that. I think that maybe,
cannon bomb is good. We got to popularize that. If that's not a popular term already. Yeah, that was a cannon bomb right there.
It was a total cannon bomb. I mean, could you imagine? And it's I like how it's set up with Kate saying, my father used to talk about you in the 1970s. Did I ever tell you about my father talking to you in the 1970s? It was in the 1970s, Doctor. She says it a number of times. But anyway, no, he never said anything about her granddaughter. What a wonderful way to introduce that conversation. Someone who's known the Doctor for as long as anyone who could possibly be on the show right now. R.I.P. William Russell.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it kind of makes sense why he doesn't go back to talk to Susan. Although, if you sort of extrapolate from his comment that, well, chaos and, destruction follow me everywhere. Like, well, why do you go anywhere?
Yeah, and why do you have any friends? And why did you get married, dude? Twice, potentially. You do. Yeah, so the explanation doesn't quite wash. I think,
it's not. It's not really good enough. Come to think of it,
headcanon. The Doctor lies. Rule number 1.
Yeah, that's I think definitely a lie. I think it was just too tough for him to go back. Like that's he shies away from that kind of deep emotion as we just kind of saw on Rogue, right?
Doctor, you're never right. You never call. One day you shall come back. You said.
Yeah,
and then you looked in your diary and you said, "How about never?"
I remember when we were talking about Time Flight and Arc of Infinity and his whole weird abandonment of Tegan and then taking her back and sort of liking that, but also not liking being reminded of how he behaved, I think. Again, a lot of that is subtext. But I think it all tracks with his... Yeah, here exactly. So I think that works. Okay, and so one other... Yeah.
I'm just going to throw this in here. One of the things I like about the episode is the Doctor being wrong multiple times, which is kind of what you need at this stage in the plot. And you see Kate's faith in the Doctor wavering when he causes the death of that soldier, the death of an officer, because the Doctor talked her into it, and she went against her better judgment. So the Doctor gets that wrong. The Doctor missed Sutek, and he's like, "Oh, I was looking at the wrong anagram." Even the Doctor was fooled by the fake anagram. So I like that sense of like, this dude isn't, he's not a god, right? And that's very much driven home here. The god was able to fool him.
Yeah, I think that's... Yeah.
I like that we're not seeing oncoming storm Doctor,
Yeah, he's got to be fallible, for sure. I really like that bit where Kate gets to sort of play a couple of different ways against the Doctor, because... like I say, we talked about the playset stuff. I think there was a little too much just overall jokiness early on that, again, it's a different unit, it's a different era, and it's run by someone else. But the whole thing where she's like, "I love Davina McCall." It's like, okay, is anyone buttoned down here? Like it says to, like, I know you're a pro, but I'm not getting that vibe quite so much.
But again, all pause to record a Davina McCall podcast.
Yeah, but she brings it back later, is what I'm saying. Like she's kind of saved, and then she kind of saves it, brings it back to something serious. Although I did think when Harriet Harbinger starts ranting, not that it would have made any difference, but why not just grab her and cuff her right then and there? She's kind of like looking at her. Why are you saying things? It's like you'd think someone with the instincts of someone who works at UNIT would just go grab her, like get her in a cell right now. Like,
foolish mortal, she's a bad guy. No cell can hold me.
Yeah, I wouldn't. She probably would have just started disintegrating people, but it is what it is.
Okay, so I want to talk about another harbinger buried in plain sight, and that is both the title and the little logo for Empire of Death, which is Sutek. What Sutek the Destroyer wants to bring about is the death of everything. And the fact that it's written within the police box section of the TARDIS. So
I totally missed that.
Yeah, okay.
It says Empire of Death.
Yes, within when they unveiled all the titles at once. Do you remember they did little title cards for them? And the one for Empire of Death is written within the police box zone at the top of the TARDIS.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
right. Yeah.
Are we meant to take that literally? Like,
I think Sutek's got the TARDIS, man. And, I think we're talking like a Master Trilogy kind of level of TARDIS torture going on here, or, TARDIS perversion. is going to happen in Empire of Death. Because what would Sutekh do with the TARDIS? He'd wipe out all of creation at once, starting with
just
the Osirians.
Before we leave the unit stuff and the whole background of this, there's an interesting note. I noted that every other lead, every other person who's a sort of a main character in this, and there's quite a few. You have Mel, you have Kate, you have Susan Triad, etc. Her mom. They're all women. There are no guys so much in this episode. And again, I'm not, there's nothing wrong with that, but it just kind of struck me as like, oh, this is, Shooty and the ladies.
Yeah.
That's the show.
And we are also in a world where the top tech CEO is a woman. And does stupid Elon Musk style dances when she comes out on stage. It's definitely a very feminist vision, perhaps a bit too kind of not realistic in that sense. Like, we do have to suffer the Elon Musks of the world and workplaces that are not as idealized as that. But yeah, anyway, doesn't matter. I think I kind of like the unit stuff, but I want to say one more unit thing, which is where did most of the Pyramid of Mars take place?
At the Unit HQ. Yeah, that was it. Future Unit HQ. Now I'm remembering.
Yes.
So you've had more time for research.
Yes. So I wonder if Sutekh hasn't also wrapped itself around Unit HQ as well. And I
just
wonder
as a
if
concept, this is obviously far away from that house.
Yeah, but just in some packing box somewhere, and some crate started humming when they moved it, to Unit Tower.
All right, so bringing it back to Sutekh. Okay, so let's think about this. Like, what had to happen? Like, obviously, it's been following the Doctor or being part of the TARDIS. Like, what was the trigger here exactly? That's not. Was it the time window? It seems like doing the time window was the thing that ended up releasing Sutekh somehow.
I wonder. Yes, I think you might have hit on it.
Well, the thing is, I'm not entirely sure. I kind of wish they had sort of handheld me a little bit more through, like it's almost like
I think
there was a
meant to be a
pocket
reveal,
watch opening thing.
Yeah,
sorry.
It sounds like that's a reveal that they unintentionally released Sutekh, but we'll only realize that in retrospect. That the time window was an important part of the plan, that it was a trap, possibility of it being a trap.
And then you have Susan Triad and Harriet Harbinger, but they seem slightly different. Like, Susan Triad is clearly struggling with what's going on. There is a real Susan Triad, in other words. Like, she's a human and she's been taken over. Dreams. Yeah, and she's sort of been taken over by Sutekh. But then why her? What's special about her? And
it's probably the software. It's probably the software. It's the fact that Triad software is in everything, including Unit HQ.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be a thing, or I almost like the idea of I just picked someone to fool you. You know what I mean? And it's really like it's just a random thing, and I sent her image through time to mess with you, but it was all a red herring. Like, it's just it got you here. And it got you focused on this software release so that you'd be away from like Unit HQ, and then I could have release stuff and you wouldn't be able to stop me or something like that. Maybe that's the idea, which I kind of like. I also did like the scene with him and Susan Triad where he's kind of talking to her and kind of believably like gets in her head, right there. Like, that really worked for me. Really good performance by both of them.
I mean, that is such a difficult scene to write, right? You and I, you both know, having worked in tech journalism, like how hard it would be to get the Doctor through to like the biggest CEO in the world, that last minute. So I like that they walk us through the steps. Mel is in the clear. She's on the media team. The Doctor flashes the psychic paper. The guard doesn't even blink. They have that moment. The Doctor has his little breakdown, and Mel is definitely like, this is my, like, it felt real, and Susan Twist felt real as a tech CEO. Who's like, oh, like I'm trying to be all bonhomie, but I'm going on stage in 15 seconds. Like, she's actually a nice person at that point. And then he zeroes in on the dreams, and we see them all later, like White Walker, Susan Twist. All of this great stuff. I love it. It is headcanon exploding stuff. I'm almost at the stage of like begging them to connect it to Bad Wolf and to connect it to the Impossible Girl, to Clara, to the Clara Splinter. Like, who knows how big RTD's ambitions are here? This sort of recurring through time motif that has happened many times in New Who.
Well, he's got to like rein it in a little bit because I think he has to assume there's some fairly
Russell,
new viewers who can't
go for broke. It'd be mad. Tie it all in.
He could string a lot together. Well, we're definitely going to guarantee to see the Doctor and Mel on a motorcycle next episode because we didn't see them on a motorcycle together this time. So
Exactly
that's good
where
times.
my brain went. Yes. So not everyone's dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we've seen some images of dead planets, in one of the trailers.
Did we? Oh, speaking of
Yeah.
trailers, you know what was interesting? This is probably purely coincidence because I'm sure the Sutek reveal was need to know. But when they did the 60 years in time and space trailer, which was something they did with the sort of mess of anniversary stuff in November, there was one sort of Uber trailer for like the series that incorporated clips from all the eras. And there's a splits of the few monsters they show. They only show about 5 or 6. And there's a moment of showing Sutek's face. It's like the moment where his eyes light up. And it was like, was that a hint? I mean, it's a classic moment in the classic series. So maybe it was just someone did it and then put together the trailer and maybe RTD was like, wink. Perfect.
Yes, exactly.
Or maybe he suggested, why don't get Sutek in there or something? Or maybe everybody was in on it. Who knows?
Hiding in plain sight. I love now, part of where my brain has gone over the last few days of churning this over in my headcanon is that RTD dad joked us, right? You can reverse engineer it, right? Oh, I want to bring back Sutek. How am I going to do that? Sutek. A CEO called Sue, and it's Sutek, and that's brilliant. And you know why else that's brilliant? It's like a subliminal message to kids, class action lawsuit against big tech.
Make sure you start suing tech companies.
Yes, exactly.
Get some lawyers when you grow up, kids. The tech companies have been really bad to you, so they probably deserve it.
They do go there. It's very interesting. Right before Susan Twist changes, she's going off script. She's talking about how the tech companies have fooled us and all the things they've done wrong. So wow, this is RTD is on the ramparts.
So we're gonna figure out like what Sutek's been doing all this time. This sounds like it's going to invalidate a lot of extracurricular material that's had some Sutek appearances, I think, in Big Finish and some novels and short stories. I will say one thing it is not going to invalidate is a great Big Finish adventure called Bride of Peladon, which I'm kind of being a little spoilery even mentioning because the connections to the Sutek and the Pyramids of Mars are not obvious at all. But I will say it still works even with the return of Sutek here. So anyway, great Big Finish, by the way.
Bride of Peladon.
Definitely in my top 5. So, and then we're going to find out like how he survived, I guess, because the Fourth Doctor looks like he was pretty optimistic. Like speaking of rule number 1, he was all like, "Oh, I've trapped him in the time corridor. He's going to be aged 7,000 years, and I'm going to sort of expunge him to the end of the universe." So here's my theory on this: is that as an Osiran, Sutek was more long-lived than the Doctor could have even imagined. He did get to the end of the universe, and basically figured out his way back, or maybe latched onto the TARDIS during one of its many visits to the end of the universe we've seen, right?
He was there on Utopia all along.
Yeah, or when he visited me or whatever, like all these things. Like there's many, you could pick your time almost.
You could have all of them. You could have all of them. Every time went to the end of the universe, kept filling up on Sutek. You
could argue Wild Blue Yonder, which started this whole Pantheon thing, was arguably like the end of the universe in some weird way. So yeah, they're probably gonna latch onto one of those things and be like, that's sort of what's the path, the initial path back.
Well, here's another thing they may latch onto. I'm gonna again planting a theory flag here. I don't think we're done with classic series villains. I'm still holding out hope for the Valiard, but I think with the triad and with the mention of the triple god and the triangles everywhere, I think we're being set up for three, count them, 3 seasons with big bad classic Doctor Who villains. And I think that would, the more I think about it, the more I think that would be an absolute masterstroke for RTD. Because you think about what has it lacked over the last 20 years? Well, it's done good at sort of resurrecting the Daleks and the Cybermen and the classic stuff and introducing just a few new monsters that we want to see again and again, like the Weeping Angels. But it's really also like, it's time to go back to the well. You know what I mean? It's time, there's stuff from Classic Who that we can do with Disney money that would look so good that doesn't have to feel like you're pandering to the fans because the showrunner's a fan, right? And if he's burying it deep in puzzles about triangles and triads, and there are going to be 3 of these, so I think the Valiard may yet come. And we do know
I feel like
a generation reference in season 2. Just going to say that.
Boy. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of these sci-fi franchises, when they do OP villains, they do too many of them. Like if you look at the old Star Trek, even the original series, there were so many like godlike beings out in the galaxy. It just got kind of ridiculous. And I would say Doctor Who got a little carried away recently with that. I mean, we recently did Flux for the podcast, which was loaded with overpowered villains. Yep. And if you look at the Jodie Whittaker era, there was I remember there was like an episode called, I think it was Can You Hear Me? Or
one of the ones I haven't seen.
There was another one. There was a couple. There was other overpowered villains here and there in the Whittaker era that were just random and just forgotten about. But it's like, if you're going to introduce something on this cosmic scale with this kind of power, like we already have a bunch, right? You know, like, and I'm really glad RTD is like, oh yeah, well, I don't have to like invent some new thing. I can do something interesting with Sutek. I can bring back the Celestial Toy Maker. And then we've just, the Valiard we've already gone over that.
You know what I'm starting to realize, Pete? What the Pantheon is, and this should warm the cockles of every Doctor Who fan's heart. The Pantheon is a spreadsheet. I think that RTD is making his spreadsheet of all the gods in Doctor Who. Because he's a Doctor Who fan, this is what he does. But he has Disney money to make his spreadsheet, so he creates the Pantheon.
I don't want to spoil greatest show in the galaxy for you, because I know that was in your Rage Quit era. But yep, there's another one. Like,
okay, perfect.
Over up those guys, bring them back. Not that we're dying to see them again.
That we seem to be on course in an episode that mentions both Susan and Sutek and touches those live wires of Doctor Who. I mean, I love that he's daring to go there, and the sense of everything being tied together is really palpable, isn't it? Everything was in here. There's the classic show going back to a reference from 1964. There's Mel, and there's it's feeling all like RTD is like, I'm just going to take all these threads and give them one almighty tug, and Doctor Who will look younger than it's ever been and more coherent than it's ever been.
Yeah, I'll say that's exactly the vibe I got, which is that even though there are a lot of questions that are still to be answered, and hopefully we'll get a bunch of them next week, it does feel like it's moving in a clarifying direction. And maybe I'm being fooled, right? Like, because Lost used to feel like this too, and then would constantly push that carrot a little further out and a little further out.
Did you say clarifying direction?
Oh,
Clara returns. Jenna Coleman returns. Fact. Take it to the back.
Well,
no.
Someday we will need to figure out where the Clara Splinter is in this episode. That is not today, but guys, if you ever tune into the regular podcast where we dissect every single Doctor Who story from the television program in random order, you will hear all our theories on where the Clara Splinter is throughout the Doctor's run. Hey, why not go ahead and follow the podcast either here on YouTube or on whatever podcast app you're listening in, as well as leave a review, perhaps in the Apple Podcasts app. That really does help the show, or rate it if it's on Spotify. You can do that in your mobile app. And go ahead and follow us on social. We're at Pull to Open or Pull to Open 63 on most networks. We were pretty active on TikTok. So that's a great place to follow us there if you're doing the socials. But hey, we got some great comments on YouTube. And go ahead, you can even email us. do that.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
openpodcast@gmail.com.
I do want to say one thing about the random adventure that we're on. In the style of RTD, I'm going to plant some future spoilers for things that have not yet happened in your timeline. We are about to go on a random adventure to somewhere that's very close to Pyramids of Mars. In the Doctor Who timeline, may touch on many of the things that we've just talked about from the Tom Baker era. So come on back for that. Stay on the random journey with us. You know it makes sense. And we promise we won't abandon you and leave you as a corpse full of sand.
And by the way, the random journey will resume after Empire of Death. So we've banked a few episodes in the last few weeks, and we're going to bring that back. There was we did do Delta in the Bannerman in a midweek. Go back and listen to that if you missed that during this current season. But we feel it sort of makes more sense to pace these out a little bit, considering we've got we're overflowing. Our cup runneth over of Doctor Who right now, and we're saving.
Do you know what?
Some of our
I
stuff
realize
for later.
we've put Sylvester McCoy in a weird time slot, so that seems entirely appropriate. That was a big part of the death of Doctor Who in his era. Poor
Not
guy.
his fault. Not his fault.
Not his fault. Go back to Delta and the Bannerman and listen. We loved it. Love you, Sylvester. All right. Thanks for listening.
I feel the time corridor closing on me. I feel myself being pushed ahead, pushed forward in time, pushing forward to Empire of Death. Come back next week.
7,000 years until we see it. All right. Bye, guys.
Take care, everybody.